Dust kicked up from Billy's worn sneakers as he ran across the backyard, his arms stretched wide like wings. The 6-year-old made engine noises with his mouth, pretending his body was a spacecraft zooming between planets. His toy shuttle lay forgotten near the porch steps. He didn't need it anymore. He was the spaceship now. The South African sun beat down on the Grant family property, turning the afternoon air thick and warm. Beyond the fence, the wildlife preserve stretched for miles, full of sounds that most children would find frightening. Billy had grown up with those sounds. They were normal to him. Under the acacia tree, a honey badger watched the boy play. Patches had been part of the family since she was a tiny cub brought in after poachers killed her mother. That was 4 years ago. Now she was full-grown, stocky, and powerful, with silver-gray fur across her back and black fur on her belly and legs. She yawned, showing teeth that could crack bone, then settled her head back on her paws. One eye stayed open, always keeping track of the small human she considered hers. Billy swooped past her, nearly tripping over his own feet. He laughed and spun around, arms still spread. The year was 2287, and humanity had been part of something called the Galactic Council for 15 years now. Billy's father explained it sometimes, how Earth had friends out among the stars. Billy didn't really understand it all, but he thought it was cool that aliens were real. High above the property, something moved through Earth's atmosphere. A patrol craft, sleek and silver, descended slowly. Inside, 3 officers studied their scanners with growing concern. Confirmed, Officer Grove said, her purple skin darkening with worry. Unregistered settlement. And there's a life form matching Death World Predator classifications. Commander Rilnoth leaned forward in his seat. His species had 4 arms, and he used 2 of them to pull up more detailed scans. That's a honey badger. Class A, threat level. What's it doing near a population center? There's a small human nearby. Officer Henna added, his antennae twitching nervously. Juvenile, by the size readings. Sir, it looks like the predator is stalking the child. The commander's face hardened. Earth was classified as a Class 9 Death World, one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. Most species avoided it except for official business. The creatures here could kill in dozens of ways, and even the plants were often toxic. Protocol was clear when children were involved near dangerous fauna. Prepare for immediate intervention, Rilnoth ordered. Standard rescue procedure. Stun equipment only. We extract the child and contain the predator until local authorities arrive. The 3 officers suited up in light combat armor and descended in a smaller shuttle. They touched down at the edge of the property, their boots crunching on the dry grass. The fence was easy enough to step over. They moved quickly toward the backyard where their scanners showed the child's location. Billy was in the middle of describing a space battle to himself when the aliens appeared around a corner of the house. He stopped running and stared. They were tall, taller than his dad, and they wore shiny armor that reflected the sunlight. One of them had 4 arms. Another had things sticking out of their head like bent sticks. Wow, Billy breathed. Under the tree, Patches raised her head. Her small eyes focused on the strangers. Something in her ancient instincts recognized a threat, even if she'd never seen anything like these creatures before. Child, remain calm, Commander Rilnoth said through his translator. The device turned his words into English, but the voice sounded flat and mechanical. We are Galactic Safety Patrol. You are in danger. Come with us immediately. Billy's smile faded. He didn't feel like he was in danger. He felt confused. What? What? The predator, Officer Grove said, pointing at Patches. That creature is extremely dangerous. We must remove you from this area at once. Officer Henta moved toward Billy, reaching out with both hands. The boy backed away, his eyes going wide. These strangers were trying to grab him. His father always said never go with strangers, and these were the strangest strangers he'd ever seen. No, Billy said, his voice small. I want my dad. There is no time, Henta insisted, moving closer. His hands caught Billy's arm. That's when Billy started to cry. He didn't understand what was happening. The aliens scared him. Their armor was scary. Their mechanical voices were scary. He tried to pull away, but the alien's grip was too strong. Under the tree, Patches went very still. The small human was making distress sounds. The strangers were touching him, holding him when he clearly didn't want to be held. She could see him trying to get away. A low growl built in her throat. Officer Grove heard it and looked over. The honey badger was standing now, her body low to the ground. Grove had reviewed the Earth fauna database during their descent. Honey badgers were known for being aggressive, but they were small. This one probably weighed 20 pounds at most. Her species had handled creatures 10 times that size. "Don't worry about the animal," Grove said with a laugh. "It's barely the size of a ration pack." Patches watched the stranger laugh at her. She watched Billy crying, struggling, afraid. The boy called out, his voice breaking. "Patches! Patches, help!" Everything in the honey badger's brain clicked into a single, clear purpose. Protect the small human. Remove the threat. She'd faced venomous snakes, angry leopards, and once even a young lion that wandered onto the property. Size meant nothing to her. Danger meant nothing to her. Fear didn't exist in her vocabulary. She charged. For an animal that looked stocky and slow, Patches moved like lightning. Her claws dug into the dirt, propelling her forward. The aliens had perhaps 1 second to register what was happening before she launched herself into the air, jaws open, targeting Officer Grove's extended arm. Grove's armor was military grade, designed to withstand impacts from projectile weapons. The honey badger's teeth went through it like it was paper. Her powerful jaws clamped down, found the softer joint material, and tore. Grove screamed. It was a high-pitched sound that sent local birds fleeing from nearby trees. She fell backward, trying to shake the animal off. Patches held on, her teeth grinding deeper. "Hostile creature," Commander Rilnoth shouted. "Defensive measures." Officer Henta released Billy and went for his stun weapon. The child stumbled backward, still crying, but Patches had accomplished her goal. The strangers weren't touching him anymore. Henta fired. The stun blast hit Patches square in the side, enough energy to drop a full-grown human instantly. The honey badger flinched, released Grove's arm, and turned her head to look at Henta. Her eyes were dark and absolutely fearless. Then she charged him instead. "That's impossible," Henta whispered. "The stun setting should have." He didn't finish the sentence. Patches hit him like a furry missile, climbing up his armor with her claws. Her thick skin and incredible pain tolerance made her nearly immune to most stun weapons. Evolution had designed her to fight things much larger than herself and win. Commander Rilnoth's helmet display flashed urgent warnings. His combat computer was analyzing the creature, pulling up more detailed information from the Earth database. What he read made his blood run cold. Honey badger. Fearlessness rating at maximum. Territorial aggression at extreme levels. Bite force capable of cracking turtle shells. Thick skin resistant to bee stings, snake bites, and most small arms fire. Known to fight lions, hyenas, and armed humans. Recorded instances of continuing fights after sustaining injuries that would kill most animals. AT the bottom of the file, in bright red text, was a single line. Recommended engagement protocol. Avoid contact at all costs. They grabbed a child right in front of one of Earth's most fearless predators. Rilnoth realized with sinking horror that they hadn't rescued anyone. They'd started a war they couldn't win. Officer Henta crashed to the ground with Patches clinging to his chest plate. Her claws scraped against the armor, leaving deep scratches in material designed to withstand combat conditions. She bit at anything she could reach, looking for weak points, and her ancient instincts told her exactly where to find them. Grove was still on the ground, clutching her damaged arm. Blood seeped through the torn armor plating, dark purple against her skin. She trained for hostile encounters with armed militants, with dangerous criminals, with rogue AI systems. Nobody had prepared her for a 20-pound ball of rage with fur. "Deploy containment net," Commander Rilnoth ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. He pulled his own stun weapon, adjusted it to maximum setting. If the lower power hadn't worked, maybe higher voltage would. Officer Henna rolled, tried to dislodge the honey badger. Patches rode his movements like she'd done it 1,000 times, which in a way, she had. She'd wrestled with her siblings as a cub, tumbled with other animals at the rehabilitation center, played rough with Billy when his parents allowed it. Her body understood momentum and balance instinctively. She found a gap in Henna's armor where the neck piece met the helmet. Her teeth sank in, not deep enough to kill, but enough to hurt. Henna's scream joined Grove's, creating a chorus of alien panic that echoed across the property. Billy had stopped crying. He stood frozen near the porch, watching his friend fight the scary strangers. Part of him knew he should run inside and get his dad, but he couldn't move. He'd never seen Patches like this before. At home, she was gentle. She let him pet her, feed her treats, even dress her up in silly hats sometimes. This version of her was something different, something ancient and wild. Commander Rilnoth fired his stun weapon. The blast caught Patches across her back. She snarled, released Henna's neck, and turned to face this new attacker. Her silver-gray fur stood on end, making her look twice her size. Blood flecked her muzzle, though none of it was hers. For a moment, the commander and the honey badger stared at each other. Rilnoth had 4 arms, advanced technology, military training, and 30 years of combat experience. Patches had teeth, claws, and absolutely no sense of self-preservation. In that moment, looking into those dark, fearless eyes, Rilnoth knew which of them was truly more dangerous. Grove managed to pull out a containment net from her belt. The device was designed to expand and wrap around hostile targets, temporarily immobilizing them. She threw it with her good arm, her aim true despite the pain. Patches saw the net coming. She dropped flat to the ground, and the net sailed over her back, missing by inches. Before Grove could even process the miss, the honey badger was moving again, zigzagging across the yard with speed that seemed impossible for her stocky build. "How is she dodging?" Grove gasped. The targeting computer said it was a guaranteed hit. "Earth predators," Hinton managed to say, pressing his hand against his bleeding neck. "They don't move like our models predict. They're too unpredictable." Rilnoth backed toward the house, keeping his weapon trained on Patches. His helmet display continued feeding him information about honey badgers, and each new fact was worse than the last. They'd been known to delay eating after being bitten by venomous snakes, waiting for the venom to wear off, then finishing their meal. They raided beehives despite being stung hundreds of times. They picked fights with animals that should terrify them. The honey badger circled them now, low to the ground, calculating. She was breathing hard but showed no signs of slowing down. 2 of the 3 intruders were injured. The third had a weapon. She needed to remove that weapon. Billy finally found his voice. "Stop hurting my friends," he yelled at the aliens. His small hands were balled into fists. "You're the bad guys." His words made Rilnoth's heart sink even lower. They'd come to rescue this child, and now he thought they were villains. The commander realized with cold clarity that they'd handled this situation in the worst possible way. They'd seen Death World and Dangerous Predator and Child, and they'd reacted without thinking, without investigating, without asking questions. Patches started to advance on Rilnoth when a new sound cut through the chaos. The front door of the house slammed open. Heavy footsteps pounded across the porch. A male human voice, deep and commanding, shouted one word that made everyone freeze. "Patches, halt!" The honey badger stopped mid-stride. Her body remained tense, ready to spring, but she didn't move forward. Robert Grant appeared around the corner of the house, and he was carrying a rifle. Not a fancy energy weapon like the aliens had. An old-fashioned Earth rifle that used gunpowder and metal bullets. The kind that could punch through most standard armor plating. His eyes took in the scene instantly. 2 injured alien officers. His son crying near the porch. Patches in full combat mode, blood on her face. A third alien pointing a weapon in his general direction. That Robert's expression went from confusion to understanding to cold rage in the span of 2 seconds. He raised the rifle and pointed it directly at Commander Rilnoth's head. His hands were steady. His voice was deadly calm. "Step away from my son. Drop your weapon. Do it now, or I will paint this yard with whatever color your blood is." Rilnoth's translator caught every word. The human wasn't making empty threats. The commander had seen enough combat to recognize a trained soldier when he faced one. This man knew how to use that rifle, and more importantly, he was willing to use it. "Please," Rilnoth said, slowly lowering his stun weapon. "We meant no harm. We thought the child was in danger." "In danger from what?" Robert demanded. His rifle didn't waver. "From Patches? She's been part of this family since Billy was 2 years old." Billy ran past the aliens, giving them a wide berth, and positioned himself behind his father's legs. His small hands grabbed Robert's pants. "Dad, they tried to take me. They grabbed me, and Patches saved me." Robert's jaw tightened. His finger rested very close to the trigger. "You grabbed my son without permission, on private property, while he was playing in his own backyard." Grove tried to stand, using her good arm to push herself up. "Sir, please understand. Earth fauna is classified as extremely dangerous. The Honey Badger Registry lists them as—" "I know what they're listed as," Robert interrupted. "I also know Patches. I raised her from a cub after your Galactic Council's precious regulations failed to stop poachers from killing her mother. She's never hurt a human in her life. She only attacked you because you were threatening Billy." Commander Rilnoth's mind raced through everything he'd been taught about Death World protocols. Secure the area. Neutralize threats. Protect civilian populations. But they'd skipped the most important step. Assess the actual situation before acting. Above them, the patrol ship's sensors detected the armed confrontation. An alarm sounded in the ship's bridge. The AI system automatically flagged the situation as a potential diplomatic incident and sent a priority message to the council representative currently aboard. In his quarters, Ambassador Trell received the alert. He read through the initial report with growing disbelief. A patrol unit had engaged with Earth citizens without proper clearance. Civilians injured. Armed confrontation in progress. He'd been part of Earth integration efforts for 3 years, and he'd seen variations of this exact scenario play out dozens of times. Every single time, the aliens were wrong and the humans were right. Trell activated his communicator. "Prep my shuttle. I'm going down there personally." Back in the yard, the standoff continued. Officer Henta had managed to stop his neck wound from bleeding, though he looked pale and shaky. Grove sat on the ground, no longer able to stand. Commander Rilnoth stood very still, hands away from his weapons, trying desperately to figure out how to de-escalate. Patches remained between Robert and the aliens, still ready to attack. She glanced back at Billy, checking that he was safe behind his father. Satisfied that he was protected, she focused back on the intruders. Her message was clear. "Try that again, and you won't walk away." Billy peeked around his father's leg. His tears had stopped, replaced by confusion. "Dad? Are these the good aliens you told me about?" Robert's expression softened slightly when he looked down at his son. "Some aliens are good, buddy. Some just make really bad choices." He raised his voice, addressing the officers. "You're going to explain to me, very clearly and very slowly, why I shouldn't report this to Earth Authority as an attempted kidnapping." Commander Rilnoth opened his mouth to respond when the sound of another shuttle descending filled the air. This one was larger, more official. The council seal was emblazoned on its side, that Robert's grip on his rifle tightened. "How many of you are there?" "That's Ambassador Trell," Rilnoth said quietly. "He's a council representative. He outranks us." "Good," Robert said flatly. "Then he can explain why his people thought it was okay to assault a child on his own property." Ambassador Trell's shuttle touched down with barely a whisper, its advanced landing gear absorbing the impact perfectly. The doors slid open, and out stepped a figure that made even Commander Rilnoth nervous. Trell was tall, even for his species, with crystalline skin that reflected light in rainbow patterns. He wore formal diplomatic robes instead of armor, which somehow made him more intimidating rather than less. His species had eliminated every predator on their homeworld 3,000 years ago. The concept of coexisting with dangerous animals was so foreign to them that they'd literally erased it from their evolutionary history. Seeing one in person, especially one that had just injured 2 trained officers, was going to test every ounce of his diplomatic training. Trell's eyes swept across the scene. 2 officers down, one bleeding significantly. A human male holding a primitive but effective weapon. A small human child. And there, sitting calmly between them all, was the creature responsible for this disaster. It was smaller than he'd imagined, almost cute if you ignored the blood on its face. Commander Rilnoth. Trell's voice carried natural authority. Report. Robert answered before Rilnoth could. Your people grabbed my son without identifying themselves or explaining why. We tried to get away. They held him anyway. My friend protected him. That's the report. Trell turned his attention to Robert. The human didn't lower his weapon, but he wasn't aiming it directly at anyone anymore either. That was something. I am Ambassador Trell, council representative for this sector. I apologize that you felt the need to arm yourself. Felt the need, Robert repeated, his tone icy. 3 armored soldiers appear in my backyard, grab my 6-year-old, and you think I felt the need? I had the need. Big difference. Billy spoke up from behind his father. They called Patches a predator. They said she was dangerous. Trell's translator rendered the child's words, and he found himself looking at the honey badger again. By every scientific measure, the creature was dangerous. Bite force strong enough to crack bones. Claws sharp enough to tear flesh. Aggression levels that maxed out every scale. The patrol officers had been correct in their assessment of the animal's capabilities. What they'd gotten wrong was everything else. May I approach? Trell asked carefully. I give you my word. I am unarmed and mean no harm to you or your family. Robert studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Slowly. And keep your hands where I can see them. Trell moved forward with measured steps. Patches watched him but didn't react aggressively. She seemed to understand that this new arrival wasn't an immediate threat. Or perhaps she was simply tired. Fighting was exhausting work, even for honey badgers. I need to understand what happened here, Trell said. Commander Rilnoth, explain your actions from the beginning. Rilnoth straightened despite his obvious discomfort. Sir, our sensors detected an unregistered human settlement in proximity to preserved wildlife zones. Further scans showed a juvenile human in close proximity to a Class A death world predator. We followed standard protocol for endangered civilian rescue operations. We descended, attempted to extract the child from danger, and the animal attacked. Did you identify yourselves? Trell asked. Yes, sir. We told the child we were Galactic Safety Patrol. Did you explain why you were there? We told him he was in danger and needed to come with us immediately. Trell's crystalline skin darkened slightly, a sign of displeasure in his species. Did you contact local human authorities first? Did you research this specific settlement? Did you determine if the animal was actually exhibiting predatory behavior? The silence that followed was answer enough. Robert lowered his rifle slightly, though he didn't put it down. They didn't do any of that because they saw Death World and panicked. It's the same thing that happens every time your people come to Earth. You see our animals, our plants, our weather, and you forget to see us. I assure you, Trell began, but Robert cut him off. 3 months ago, a council botanical survey team tried to destroy my wife's garden because they classified tomatoes as toxic. Do you know why they did that? Because tomato plants are part of the nightshade family, and some nightshades are poisonous. They didn't bother to check which ones humans actually eat. They just saw toxic and reacted. Billy added helpfully, Mom was really mad. She chased them with a broom. Despite the tension, Trell almost smiled at that image. Almost. I was not aware of that incident. Because it didn't get reported, Robert said. Just like dozens of other incidents don't get reported. Earth Authority has a whole department dedicated to cleaning up messes when well-meaning aliens interfere with things they don't understand. Officer Grove managed to speak, though her voice was weak from blood loss. Sir, we've seen the statistics. Earth fauna kills or injures hundreds of visitors annually. We have standing protocols for treating us like we're too stupid to live on our own planet, Robert finished. Yeah, I know the protocols. I've read them. Want to know what's really killing those hundreds of visitors? Ignorance. They pet rattlesnakes because they think the rattle is cute. They try to take selfies with Cape Buffalo. They swim in waters marked dangerous because they assume our warning signs are overcautious. It's not Earth that's the problem. It's people not respecting Earth. Trell processed this. He pulled up his personal data display and began reviewing files. Earth integration incidents, sorted by cause. The numbers told an uncomfortable story. 93% of alien injuries on Earth came from visitors ignoring local warnings or treating dangerous situations as entertainment. Only 7% were truly unavoidable accidents. The honey badger, Trell said slowly. It lives here, with your family? Her name is Patches, Billy said, his voice small but firm. She's not in it. Robert nodded. Patches has been with us for 4 years. Her mother was killed by poachers when she was just a few weeks old. We're a licensed wildlife rehabilitation center. We raise orphaned or injured animals, then release them when they're ready. Patches was too habituated to humans for safe release. She chose to stay. She chose. Trell repeated the words carefully. The concept of an animal choosing anything was difficult for him to grasp. Animals aren't machines, Robert explained, his tone softening slightly. He could see the ambassador was at least trying to understand. They have personalities, preferences, bonds. Patches bonded with Billy when he was a toddler. She's protective of him because she considers him family. That's why she attacked her officers. Not because she's a mindless predator, but because they were threatening someone she loves. Trell looked at the honey badger again, trying to see what the human saw. All he could see was efficient killing design wrapped in fur. But the creature wasn't attacking now. It sat calmly beside the child, occasionally glancing up at the boy's father, waiting for guidance. That implied intelligence. Trust. Relationship. I'm beginning to understand, Trell said quietly. The officers acted on incomplete information. They acted on prejudice, Robert corrected. They saw Death World creature and made assumptions. They never considered that maybe, just maybe, humans know our own planet better than aliens who've never set foot on it before. Commander Rilnoth spoke up, his voice heavy with regret. He's right, Ambassador. We violated protocols by not conducting proper research. We saw the classification and we reacted. We assumed the worst. Officer Hinta, still holding his neck wound, added, the creature, Patches. She was actually being very precise in her attacks. I've reviewed my helmet footage. She went for disabling strikes, not killing blows. She could have torn out my throat, but she targeted areas that would hurt, but not kill. This caught everyone's attention. Grove pulled up her own helmet recording, watching it back on her arm display. He's right. When she bit through my armor, she could have severed the major blood vessels. She didn't. She bit just to the side of them. Billy smiled, pride evident in his young voice. Patches is smart. Dad says she knows the difference between protecting and hurting bad. She was just protecting, not hurting bad. Robert finally lowered his rifle completely, though he kept it in his hands. You want to know the real tragedy here, Ambassador? If you just knocked on my door and asked about the honey badger, I would have explained everything. I would have shown you our licenses, our safety protocols, our relationship with Patches. Instead, you traumatized my son, got 2 of your people injured, and created an incident that could have ended with someone dead. Trell felt the weight of those words. This could have gone so much worse. The human was armed and trained. If he decided to shoot rather than talk, the situation could have escalated into violence that would have shattered Earth-galactic relations. I want to make this right, Trell said. What would you consider appropriate resolution? Robert thought for a moment, then looked down at Billy. What do you think, buddy? What should we ask for? Billy considered seriously, as only a 6-year-old could. An apology? And maybe they could say sorry to Patches too, because she was just being a good friend. The alien stared at the child. After everything that had happened, after the injuries and the terror and the armed standoff, the boy wanted an apology. Not compensation, not charges filed, just acknowledgement that wrongs had been done. Officer Grove pulled herself to her feet with effort. She walked slowly toward Patches, then carefully, painfully, lowered herself to one knee. The honey badger watched her, but didn't move. I'm sorry, Grove said, and she meant it. You were protecting your family. That's what good friends do. I should have seen that before I acted. Patches tilted her head, then made a soft, chuffing sound. It wasn't quite forgiveness, but it wasn't hostility either. It was acceptance. Robert set his rifle against the porch railing, finally confident enough to disarm completely. His ex-military instincts told him the immediate danger had passed. Now came the harder part, making these aliens actually understand Earth. Grove needs proper medical attention, Roberts said, his tone professional now. That wound is deeper than it looks. I can provide first aid, but you should get her to your ship's medical bay. Commander Rilnoth nodded gratefully. I'll call for medical transport. Before you do that, Trell interrupted, I need to understand something. This wildlife rehabilitation center you mentioned, it's legal? Authorized? Robert pulled out his phone, a simple Earth device that looked ancient compared to alien technology. He called up several documents and handed it to Trell. Full licensing from Earth Authority, approved by the Galactic Council's Earth Integration Office, inspected and certified every 6 months. We're one of 30 licensed centers in South Africa alone. There are hundreds across the planet. Trell studied the documents. Everything was legitimate, properly filed, exactly as it should be. The information was in the Galactic database. The patrol team should have found it if they'd bothered to check. You raised Death World predators, Trell said slowly. Intentionally. We raise orphaned and injured animals, Robert corrected. Some of them happen to be predators, yes. Most get released back into the wild once they're healthy and capable of surviving on their own. Billy sat down next to Patches and began gently petting her head. The honey badger leaned into his touch, her aggressive posture completely gone. She looked almost peaceful now, content to be near her human. Officer Henta watched this with fascination. How is that possible? The transformation from combat mode to whatever this is. It happened in seconds. Because she's not a machine with an on-off switch, Robert explained, pulling up a chair from the porch. She's an individual with emotional intelligence. She was angry because Billy was threatened. Now Billy is safe, so she's calm. It's not complicated, but she's a Death World predator, Trell protested. The database says honey badgers are fearless, aggressive, territorial. They attack lions. They dig through concrete. They're listed as one of the most dangerous animals relative to their size. Robert smiled slightly. All of that is true. Patches could absolutely tear apart this porch if she wanted to. She's strong enough and stubborn enough to do it. But she doesn't want to because she lives here. This is her home. We're family. Your species domesticated wolves into dogs, Trell said, pulling up information on his display. That took thousands of years of selective breeding. How can you claim to have domesticated a honey badger in just 4 years? We didn't domesticate her, Robert said firmly. That's the part you're missing. Patches isn't tame. She's not bred to be gentle. She's still wild in every way that matters. What we have is a relationship built on trust and respect. She chooses to be gentle with Billy because she cares about him. That choice is what makes it meaningful. Billy spoke up, his child's wisdom cutting through the complex explanations. Patches could hurt me if she wanted, but she doesn't want to because we're friends. Friends don't hurt friends. Trell struggled with this concept. In his species' civilization, safety came from control. They'd engineered their environment to eliminate danger. They'd created systems and protocols to manage risk. The idea of deliberately maintaining relationship with something dangerous, trusting it to choose not to harm you, was almost incomprehensible. What if she changes her mind? Trell asked. What if one day her instincts override her affection? What if your friend gets angry and punches you? Robert countered. Do you avoid having friends because there's a risk they might hurt you someday? That's different. My friends are rational beings. So is Patches. Just because she doesn't speak doesn't mean she doesn't think, doesn't feel, doesn't make choices. Robert gestured to the honey badger. She demonstrated incredible restraint today. She injured your officers enough to stop them, but she didn't kill them. She could have. Easily. But she chose not to. Officer Grove, who had been quietly listening while Rilnoth contacted the ship's medical team, nodded slowly. He's right, Ambassador. I've reviewed my footage 3 times now. Every bite, every scratch was precisely placed. She fought like someone with training, not like an animal in a rage. Because she has been trained, Robert said, not to attack, but to understand boundaries. We taught her from a cub what acceptable behavior looks like. When she plays with Billy, she knows to keep her claws in, to not bite too hard. She learned the same way human children learn not to hit their friends. Trell sat down on the ground, his formal robes pooling around him. This conversation was challenging everything he thought he understood about Death World protocols. The Galactic Council has been treating Earth like a dangerous laboratory for 15 years. We've had protocols, restrictions, warning systems, all designed to keep visitors safe from Earth's dangers. And how many of those protocols involve actually talking to humans about how we manage those dangers? Robert asked. The silence was answer enough. That's the problem, Robert continued. You see our planet through your fear. You catalog our animals by how they could hurt you. You never stop to ask how we live alongside them successfully. Humans didn't get to the top of Earth's food chain by being the strongest or the fastest. We got here by being smart enough to work with other species instead of just fighting them. Billy had laid his head on Patch's back, using her like a pillow. The honey badger didn't seem to mind at all. She closed her eyes, content to serve as furniture for her favorite human. Commander Rilnoth watched them, and something shifted in his understanding. We've been approaching Earth integration all wrong, haven't we? Not completely wrong, Robert allowed. Earth is dangerous. Our wildlife can absolutely kill unprepared visitors. But treating everything here like an enemy is the problem. You need to understand that humans see our world differently. We don't survive despite the danger. We survive because we learn to live with it. A medical shuttle descended, smaller and more specialized than the patrol craft. Two medical officers emerged, their equipment designed for field treatment. They immediately went to Grove and Hinta, scanning injuries and beginning treatment. Point one of the medics, an insectoid species with multiple eyes, stared at Patches. That animal did this damage? It's so small. Size isn't everything, Grove said through gritted teeth as the medic worked on her arm. I learned that the hard way. Billy perked up, suddenly excited. Do you want to see Patches do a trick? She knows lots of them. Before anyone could respond, Billy stood and ran to the porch. He came back with a rubber ball. Patches, catch. He threw the ball. The honey badger's eyes snapped open, tracked the ball's arc, and she launched herself into the air. Her jaws closed around it with perfect timing. She landed, trotted back to Billy, and dropped the ball at his feet. The aliens watched in stunned silence. Again, Billy laughed, throwing the ball in a different direction. For the next 2 minutes, they all watched a creature classified as one of Earth's fiercest predators play fetch like a happy dog. Patches seemed to enjoy showing off, catching the ball from increasingly difficult angles. When Billy finally stopped, she brought the ball back one more time and sat at his feet, looking up at him expectantly. Good girl, Billy said, scratching behind her ears. You're the best girl. Officer Hinta started laughing. It began as a chuckle and grew into full, slightly hysterical laughter. We got absolutely destroyed by someone's playmate. This is going to be the most embarrassing story in patrol history. Even Commander Rilnoth cracked a smile. I suspect this will become required viewing and training. What not to do on Death World assignments. Ambassador Trell stood, brushing off his robes. I need to make a full report on this incident. But I think the report will be very different from what the patrol expected. He looked at Robert. Would you be willing to consult on revising our Earth protocols? Clearly, we need human input on how to properly interact with your world. Robert considered this. I might be, but I have conditions. First, Earth Authority has full approval rights on any new protocols. Second, any alien visiting Earth has to complete proper cultural training first. And third, incidents like this get properly investigated instead of being swept under the rug. Agreed, Trell said immediately. All three conditions are reasonable. Billy tugged on his father's shirt. Dad, can the aliens stay for dinner? Mom made her special stew, and there's lots. Robert looked down at his son, then at the assembled aliens, some of them still bleeding. A laugh escaped him, surprised and genuine. Sure, buddy. Why not? Though I should warn you, he addressed the aliens, my wife is going to have some choice words about all this when she gets home from town. I look forward to meeting her, Trell said, and surprisingly, he meant it. The medical team finished treating Grove and Hinta, though both would need more extensive care aboard the ship. They'd stabilized the wounds enough for the officers to move without risk. Grove's arm was wrapped in regenerative bandages that glowed faintly blue. Hinta wore a neck brace that looked uncomfortable but kept his head properly supported. Ambassador Trell used the time to review more of Earth's integration files, his expression growing darker with each document he opened. Incident after incident, all following the same pattern. Aliens saw danger, reacted without understanding context, and created problems where none existed. 47 recorded incidents in the past 2 years alone, Trell said aloud, though he seemed to be talking to himself. 47 times aliens interfered with humans living their normal lives. And these are just the ones that got officially reported. Robert set up chairs on the porch while Billy entertained himself by showing Patch's different toys. The honey badger showed polite interest in each one, though she clearly preferred the rubber ball. The unreported ones are probably triple that number, Robert said. Most people don't bother filing complaints anymore. They just chalk it up to aliens being aliens and move on with their lives. Commander Rilnoth sat heavily in one of the offered chairs, his 4 arms hanging limply. His career was probably over, but somehow that didn't bother him as much as it should. The shame of what he'd done, how badly he'd misjudged the situation, weighed heavier than any disciplinary action could. I've been a patrol officer for 12 years, Rilnoth said quietly. I've rescued civilians from war zones, natural disasters, pirate attacks. I thought I was good at my job. I thought I understood how to assess danger. You do understand danger, Roberts said, not unkindly. You just don't understand Earth. There's a difference. Officer Hinta, despite his injuries, pulled up a holographic display from his wrist computer. I've been researching while the medics worked. There are over 500 species of animals that humans have successfully domesticated or formed working relationships with over your history. Dogs, cats, horses, cattle, falcons, dolphins, even elephants. Don't forget bees, Billy added helpfully. We have beehives. They make honey. Trell's crystalline skin flickered in alarm. You keep insects that can inject venom into you? Intentionally? They give us honey in exchange for protection and hive boxes, Robert explained. It's a fair trade. Most of the time, they don't sting unless they feel threatened. Most of the time, Trell repeated weakly. Robert smiled. Earth is about managed risk, Ambassador. We don't eliminate danger. We learn to work with it. The bees could sting us, but they usually don't because we built trust with them. Same with Patches. Same with every animal we work with here. The sound of a vehicle approaching made everyone turn. A dusty truck pulled up to the house, and a woman climbed out. She was short, sturdy, with sun-darkened skin and her hair pulled back in a practical braid. She took one look at the alien shuttles, the armed aliens, her husband on the porch, and her son playing with Patches, and her expression went from confused to very, very dangerous. Robert Grant, she said in a tone that made even Trell nervous. Why are there galactic patrol ships in our yard? Hi, honey, Robert said with the careful tone of a man who knows he's about to explain something complicated. These are Commanders Rilnoth, Officers Grove and Hinta, and Ambassador Trell. They had a misunderstanding about Patches. Sarah Grant's eyes narrowed. She noticed the bandages on Grove, the neck brace on Hinta. What kind of misunderstanding results in injured aliens? Billy ran over to his mother. Mom, they tried to take me because they thought Patches was dangerous, but she protected me, and she was really brave, and then Dad came out with his rifle, and now we're all friends, and they're staying for dinner. Sarah processed this information at impressive speed. Her expression cycled through several emotions: alarm, anger, protective fury, and finally landed on resigned exasperation. Of course they are, because why would we have a normal Tuesday? She walked onto the porch, set down her shopping bags, and extended her hand to Ambassador Trell. Sarah Grant, I run this rehabilitation center with my husband. I assume someone explained that we're licensed and legal. Trell shook her hand carefully. They did, and I must apologize for my personnel's actions. They acted on insufficient information. They acted like idiots, Sarah said bluntly. But I appreciate the apology. She looked at Grove and Hinta. You two need proper rest, not dinner conversation. Robert, help me get them situated in the guest room. They can recover there before heading back to their ship. The easy way she took charge of the situation, treating injured aliens like they were neighbors who'd had an accident, seemed to throw Trell completely off balance. That's very generous, but we couldn't impose. You already imposed by grabbing my son, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Might as well impose a bit more, and let me feed you. Besides, you all need to understand something about Earth before you leave. Dinner table's a good place for that kind of education. Over the next hour, the situation transformed from a diplomatic incident into something resembling a bizarre family gathering. Sarah's stew was indeed excellent, though the aliens struggled with some of the Earth spices. Billy told exaggerated stories about Patch's daily activities, making the honey badger sound like a superhero. Patches herself lounged under the table, occasionally poking her head out to investigate if anyone had dropped food between bites. Trell asked the question that had been bothering him. How do you teach your son to live like this? Aren't you afraid he'll get hurt? Sarah and Robert exchanged a look, the kind of wordless communication that long-married couples develop. Of course we're afraid, Sarah said. Every parent is afraid their child will get hurt. But wrapping him in bubble wrap and keeping him from experiencing the world doesn't help him. It just makes him unprepared for real life. Billy learns respect, Robert added. Not fear. There's a difference. He knows Patches is strong and could hurt him, so he treats her with respect. He doesn't pull her tail or poke her eyes or do things that would make her defensive. He's learned to read her body language, understand her moods. Billy nodded seriously. When Patches' ears go flat, she wants to be alone. When she makes chirping sounds, she wants to play. It's easy, easy, Officer Henta repeated with a slight laugh. For a 6-year-old human child, perhaps. That's because Billy grew up with it, Sarah explained. Earth children learn from a young age to identify dangerous plants, understand animal behavior, read weather patterns. It's part of our basic education. We don't have the luxury of living in a safe, controlled environment. Earth doesn't work that way. Trell set down his spoon. The Galactic Council has been debating whether to recommend Earth for Class 8 reclassification, dropping it down one danger level, which would allow more unrestricted tourism and trade. That would be a mistake, Robert said immediately. Earth should stay Class 9, not because we're trying to limit visitors, but because that classification requires proper preparation before arrival. Drop it to Class 8, and you'll have tourists showing up thinking they can pet wild lions. That actually happened last year, Sarah added, before the classification system was updated. A family from the Centauri sector tried to take selfies with a pride of lions in Kruger National Park. The rangers had to tranquilize the lions and evacuate the entire area. Were the visitors injured? Trell asked. No, but they filed a complaint that the lions were too dangerous and should be removed from the park. Sarah's tone made clear what she thought of that complaint. They completely missed the point that they were visiting the lions' home, not the other way around. The dinner conversation stretched on, covering topics from Earth ecology to human history to the philosophy of risk management. The aliens absorbed it all, their understanding slowly shifting. Officer Grove, resting a chair with her injured arm elevated, spoke up during a lull in conversation. I think I'm beginning to understand. You don't see Patches as a weapon you've neutralized. You see her as a person who chooses to be part of your family. Exactly, Sarah said, pleased. She's not controlled. She's cooperative. That's the key difference. A noise outside made everyone pause. It was a low, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the walls. Patches lifted her head, gave a soft chuff, and looked toward the back door. Robert stood. That'll be Spots. Spots, Trell asked, though something in his tone suggested he already dreaded the answer. Our other regular visitor, Sarah said casually. African leopard. We raised her from a cub after her mother was killed. Released her last year, but she comes back to visit every few weeks. The color drained from Trell's crystalline face, which made it go nearly transparent. There's a leopard approaching this house right now. She's probably curious about all the new scents, Robert explained, walking to the back door. Lots of strange beings here today. She'll want to investigate. Robert, perhaps we should. Trell started, but Robert had already opened the door, The leopard that padded into the yard was magnificent. Her spotted coat gleamed in the fading sunlight, muscles rippling under her fur. She was wearing a tracking collar, probably from a wildlife monitoring program. Her yellow eyes scanned the porch, taking in all the strange beings gathered there. Every alien froze. Their threat assessment systems screamed warnings. Patches trotted out from under the table and approached the leopard, making greeting sounds. The two predators touched noses, completely comfortable with each other. Billy jumped up from his chair. "Spots, you came back." And to the absolute horror of every alien present, the 6-year-old human child ran toward the leopard with his arms open. The leopard lowered her body as Billy approached, a posture of gentleness that seemed impossible for such a powerful predator. The boy wrapped his small arms around her neck, his face buried in her spotted fur. Spots made a sound somewhere between a purr and a chuff, her massive head rubbing against Billy's shoulder. Commander Rilnoth's hand instinctively went to where his weapon would normally be, before remembering he'd disarmed hours ago. Officer Henta made a strangled noise in his throat. Even Grove, who had already been mauled once today, tensed in her chair. Only Ambassador Trell remained relatively calm, though his transparency suggested otherwise. He'd seen enough today to understand that reacting would only make things worse. "She remembers me," Billy said happily, his voice muffled against Spot's fur. "I missed you, girl." Sarah stood and walked casually toward her son and the leopard. She scratched behind Spot's ears, checking the tracking collar to make sure it wasn't rubbing uncomfortably. Her territory's about 30 kilometers from here now. She must have traveled all day to visit. Traveled, Trell said faintly. A wild leopard traveled 30 kilometers to visit a human family. She was raised here, Robert explained, joining his wife and son. Bottle-fed from 2 weeks old. We released her when she was 18 months, after teaching her to hunt and survive on her own. But she remembers this place as home. More importantly, she remembers us as family. Spots allowed Billy to hug her for another minute before gently pulling away. She investigated the porch, sniffing at the aliens with clear curiosity. When she reached Trell, she sat down and stared at him with those intense yellow eyes. "What do I do?" Trell whispered, not moving. "Just sit still," Sarah advised. "She's trying to figure out what you are. You smell different from anything she knows. Let her satisfy her curiosity." The leopard leaned forward, her nose nearly touching Trell's robes. She sniffed, sneezed softly at the unfamiliar scent of his crystalline skin, then seemed to lose interest. She turned and walked back to Billy, who'd sat down on the porch steps. Officer Henta pulled out his recording device with his good hand. "No one back home will believe this without documentation. A child, a honey badger, and a leopard, all within arm's reach of each other. Want to make it even more unbelievable?" Sarah asked with a slight smile. She walked to a cabinet near the back door and pulled out 3 bowls. She filled one with water, one with fresh fruit, and one with raw meat from the cooling unit. She set them down on the porch. Patches immediately went for the fruit bowl, her favorite treat. Spots approached the meat bowl, sniffed it, then began eating with delicate bites. Billy got up and fetched his own snack from inside the house, returning with cookies and a juice box. He sat between the two predators, eating his cookies while they ate their food. "This is your everyday reality," Trell said, and it wasn't a question anymore. He was beginning to understand. "This is just Tuesday dinner for your family." "Pretty much," Robert confirmed. "Though usually we don't have dinner guests who've been mauled." "That's new." Despite himself, Grove laughed. "I suppose I earned that." I grabbed a child in front of his protective friend. The outcome was predictable, looking back. "The problem is your training never prepared you to look at it that way," Sarah said, not unkindly. "You were taught, death world equals danger. Predator near child equals rescue situation. You followed your training perfectly. Your training was just wrong." Trell pulled out his official data tablet and began making notes. "I'm going to recommend complete overhaul of Death World protocols. Not just for Earth, but for how we approach all Class 9 planets. We've been operating under assumption that high-danger environments are problems to solve rather than ecosystems to understand." "That's a start," Robert said. "But here's something else to consider. Earth isn't even the most dangerous class 9 planet in the galaxy. There are at least 4 others with higher threat ratings. Are you going to approach all of them with the same ignorance you brought to Earth? The question hung in the air. Trell's fingers paused over his tablet. He hadn't considered that. Earth had been the focus because humans were council members, active participants in galactic society. The other class, 9 worlds, were less developed or had chosen isolation. But they existed, and the Galactic Council's approach to them was probably just as flawed. You're right, Trell admitted. We need a fundamental shift in how we engage with high-risk environments. Not just protocols, but philosophy. Billy had finished his cookies and was now leaning against Spots, using her as a backrest. The leopard didn't seem to mind. Patches had curled up in his lap, her belly full of fruit. The boy looked perfectly content, sandwiched between 2 of Africa's most dangerous predators. Officer Henta finally voiced the question they'd all been thinking. How do you trust them so completely? Spots is wild. She hunts, kills, lives independently. What stops her from seeing Billy as prey? Imprinting, Sarah explained. She remembers him from when she was a cub. He was part of her family group during her most formative months. That bond doesn't just disappear because she's grown and wild now. She knows his scent, his voice, his presence. He's family, and you don't eat family. But surely there's risk, Trell pressed. What if her instincts override her memory? What if she's hungry enough, or startled? Or what if? Robert interrupted gently. That's the question you keep asking. What if the danger becomes real? Here's our answer. What if it doesn't? What if we spend our whole lives afraid of possibilities instead of living with realities? Spots has never shown aggression toward Billy. Not as a cub, not as a juvenile, not as an adult. At some point, you have to trust the evidence instead of fearing the exception. Sarah added, besides, Billy knows how to read her signals. If Spots was in a hunting mindset, her body language would be completely different. Her pupils would dilate, her muscles would tense differently, her tail would move in specific ways. Billy's been taught to recognize those signs since he could walk. He knows when to approach and when to give space. Billy demonstrated this without prompting. Spots, are you happy right now? The leopard's ears were forward and relaxed. Her tail swished lazily. She made a sound like a contented rumble. Billy nodded, satisfied. She's happy. See? Her ears would be flat if she was mad, and her tail would be still if she was hunting. 6 years old, Commander Rilnoth said with something like awe. 6 years old, and he reads predator body language better than our trained specialists. That's because it's not special training for him, Sarah explained. It's just life. Earth children learn this the way your children probably learn to operate technology. It's normal for their environment. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Spot stood, stretched in that liquid way cats have, and began grooming herself. She'd stay for a while longer, Sarah explained, probably sleep in the yard overnight, then head back to her territory in the morning. Trell finished his notes and looked at the Grant family. I'm going to close this incident officially as a misunderstanding. No charges, no formal complaints. But I'm also going to file a comprehensive report to the council recommending immediate protocol changes. And I'd like to hire you, both of you, as consultants for developing new training programs. We'll consider it, Robert said, but we're not moving off-world. Any consulting happens here, on Earth, where visiting aliens can see firsthand how things actually work. That might be even better, Trell agreed. Immersive training. Let them experience Earth properly instead of just reading about it. Officer Grove shifted in her chair, wincing at the movement. Ambassador, permission to speak candidly? Granted. I think I understand now why humans have been so successful in the Galactic Council despite being newcomers. You don't just adapt to other species' ways. You build bridges. You find common ground. You do in diplomacy what you do with your predators. You see past the danger to the individual underneath. Sarah smiled. That's probably the nicest thing anyone said about humans in a diplomatic context. Usually, we get called reckless or naive. Maybe those aren't insults, Hinta suggested. Maybe they're actually your strengths, just viewed through the wrong lens. The conversation wound down as night fell. The medical team contacted the patrol ship to arrange overnight accommodations for Grove and Hinta, both of whom needed rest before returning to duty. Trell accepted Sarah's offer of the guest room, acknowledging that he had much more to learn and staying overnight would give him more time to observe and ask questions. Billy eventually fell asleep right there on the porch steps, his head resting on Spot's shoulder, Patches still curled in his lap. Robert carefully extracted him from the pile of predators and carried him inside to bed. Neither animal seemed disturbed by his departure. They'd done their job, kept their humans safe, and now they could rest point. 3 weeks later, Commander Rilnoth stood in a training facility addressing a class of new patrol officers. The room's main screen showed footage from his helmet camera, the moment when Patches launched herself at Officer Grove. This, Rilnoth said, pausing the video, is what happens when you act on assumptions instead of information. Watch carefully. He played the footage through, showing the entire incident from approach to attack to standoff. The trainees watched in silence, seeing their own potential mistakes played out in vivid detail. This family did nothing wrong, Rilnoth continued. The honey badger did nothing wrong. The child did nothing wrong. We did everything wrong. We saw Death World Predator and child, and we assumed danger. We never considered that we might be looking at a family. He pulled up new protocols on the screen, ones that Ambassador Trell had helped draft with input from the Grant family and dozens of other Earth consultants. The new system required cultural research before any intervention, local authority contact as first step, and absolute prohibition on acting without understanding context. Earth families live with predators, Rilnoth said. They work with creatures that could kill them. They build relationships with danger. It sounds insane to us, but it works for them. And it's not just Earth. We've found similar patterns on 3 other class, 9 worlds. The common factor isn't the danger. It's species learning to coexist with their environment instead of trying to dominate it. One trainee raised a tentacle. Sir, how do we know when intervention is actually needed versus when it's a situation like this? You ask, Rilnoth said simply. You observe. You research. If you have time to intervene, you have time to investigate. And if you don't have time, your intervention should be offering help, not assuming you know what help looks like. Back on the Grant property, life had returned to its normal rhythm. Billy played in the yard, this time building a fort from cardboard boxes. Patches investigated each box thoroughly before approving its addition to the structure. Spots hadn't visited in a few days, but her tracking data showed she was healthy and thriving in her territory. Sarah was in the rehabilitation center's barn, feeding an orphaned baby warthog. Robert was repairing fence line near the southern boundary. Everything was peaceful, normal, exactly as it should be done. A small shuttle descended in the late afternoon, this one carrying the council seal. But this time, the visitor was expected. Ambassador Trell emerged, now wearing more practical clothing instead of formal robes. He carried a data tablet and recording equipment. Ready for lesson 2? Sarah asked, wiping her hands on a towel. Ready, Trell confirmed. Today you're teaching me about the warthogs, correct? And the ostriches if we have time. They're more dangerous than they look. Trell actually smiled at that. On Earth, I'm learning that everything is more complex than it looks. That's not a complaint anymore. It's just truth. Billy ran up to greet the ambassador, Patches trotting behind him. Mr. Trell, want to help me feed the baby warthog? He's really cute. I would be honored, Trell said, and he meant it. As they walked toward the barn, Robert joined them from the fence line. They looked like an unlikely group. 2 humans, 1 child, a galactic ambassador, and a honey badger, all moving together with easy familiarity. IT wasn't the alliance that would make galactic headlines. It wasn't the diplomatic breakthrough that would be studied in universities. But it was real. It was built on understanding instead of fear, on relationship instead of protocol, on trust that had been earned through patience and education. 6 months later, Earth's tourism numbers had actually increased despite maintaining its Class 9 status. The difference was preparation. Visitors now completed mandatory cultural training. They learned Earth ecology, understood human relationships with their environment, and arrived with respect instead of just fear. Incidents of alien injury dropped by 70% in the first quarter alone. The remaining 30% were mostly unavoidable accidents or cases where visitors ignored clear warnings, which happened on every planet regardless of classification. The Grant Family Rehabilitation Center became an official training site for alien visitors wanting to understand Deathworld ecology. They hosted ambassadors, scientists, teachers, and regular tourists. Everyone who left understood Earth a little better, and Patches? She became something of a celebrity in galactic databases, her image used in training materials galaxy-wide. The honey badger who protected a human child and changed how an entire civilization viewed death worlds. She would have been completely indifferent to the fame, of course. All she cared about was that Billy was safe, the fruit bowl was regularly filled, and the sunny spot under the acacia tree remained comfortable. That was enough for her. And it was enough for Earth.